Welcome to episode 483. This week, the Council for Biblical Manhood and Womanhood's attack on a small Texas church backfires, leading us into a conversation about God and gendered language. Then the editor of World Magazine has left in protest as yet another evangelical institution takes a sharp turn to the right. Are we witnessing the final fury of the dying religious right? Then, Phil talks to Dr. Francis Collins, the director of the National Institutes of Health and the founder of BioLogos, about whether science and faith can really be reconciled. Dr. Collins shares about his journey from atheism to faith, his role in overseeing the country's response to COVID-19, and why America's culture war is now literally killing people. All of that, plus Phil was unknowingly on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, and a meaningless archaeological discovery in Michigan. Here's the Holy Post.
Hey there, welcome back to the Holy Post podcast. This is Phil Vischer. I am here with so many amazing, wonderful people for a special episode that we're calling Holy Post at Night because we couldn't record it during the afternoon, so it's 5:11 p.m. Is that night? That's night.
It is now.
It is here.
Yeah. In the winter.
It's
wintertime. I am here with Caitlin Chess. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi, Phil. It's actually 6 o'clock for me, so it's definitely night.
Even nightier.
Yeah.
You're the nightiest of all of us. And Sky Jitani, who turned out his lights in his office to feel more nighty.
This is like the late show at the nursing home.
Why at the nursing home?
Because, they have dinner at like 3.
So they go to bed early.
They go to bed early.
Okay, I see. So, right. Whatever. And Jason Rugg. Hi, Jason.
Hey there.
Hi, how many miles you walk today?
3.5. Yeah.
It's getting chilly.
It was cold. It was so cold. Yeah, it was 30 this morning.
Yeah. Oh, you're gonna keep it up? Can you do it?
Oh yeah.
All winter? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, with that in mind, here's the theme song. What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Sky and Phil and the Holy Post. Sky and Phil and the Holy Post. And sometimes Caitlin. So Caitlin's housing situation has improved slightly. We think it's because possibly the loud person next door has a romantic interest that is causing him to improve his behavior.
And it's not Caitlin.
No, I know it is not me. No, there is some girl that's been over there. I do hope it's improving his behavior. Yeah. So I fully have a personal interest in their relationship for the sole sake of my sleep.
Yeah. So, have you? Hang on. Are you getting all your papers for the semester written right now while it's quiet? You're like trying to work ahead so you don't.
If I wasn't so sick right now, I would be doing that.
No, she's sick.
I know. I don't have COVID, which is good, but I haven't been feeling well.
But you have something vid. You have something or something I don't know which one it is. If you don't have COVID, you have COVID, VAD. Covicular.
You're not making any sense.
Thank you. Okay. We need to tell you about something that's coming up. The November Holy Post live stream is on. Hang on. I wrote down the date so I wouldn't forget it. Oh, it's on. No, I didn't write down the date. It's on November 20, but Julie 29th. Sent it to me. November 29th.
29th.
Thank you. Yeah. At 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we have a special guest. The special guest is going to be Dr. John Walton, a professor of Old Testament extraordinaire, flamethrower, firebrand, pot stirrer anyway, he's a lot of fun. He's been on the show like 6 times. And he's going to be live with us on the live stream, so you can send in questions, and he'll answer every question you ever had about the Old Testament. And that's all I'm going to say about that. It's guaranteed. Wow. No question will be left unanswered about the Old Testament.
All that to say, you're leaving off like the important part, Phil.
Oh, it's for Patreon subscribers.
That's right.
You need to go to the Holy Post website, holypost.com, click on the Patreon support button, and you can learn all about it, right? Is that what I'm supposed to say, Sky?
That's right.
Okay. Caitlin, say, don't delay, order today. Say that, Caitlin.
I'm not going to say that.
Come on, man.
Nope.
You want me to do it, Phil?
You have a great voice. No, I don't want you to do it, Jason. It wouldn't be. It'll sound creepy. I wanted Caitlin to do it because you're in the dark in a basement somewhere.
Only for the people who are watching.
I know, but we all know where you are. So there's a guy named David Olson. He lives in Norton Shores, Michigan. And he decided to demolish the stairs, the cement stairs behind his house. And he was demolishing the cement stairs behind his house, and he found something underneath. So I'm just watching Caitlin to see what her face does.
I have no idea where this is going.
He found under the first stair that he demolished was sand, and in the sand was buried 3 bowling balls.
Okay. I was waiting. Part of me's like, who cares?
Who does care?
So he pulled them out, and he kept digging, and he found 3 more bowling balls. So
is this like a math question?
So he pulled out the first 3 bowling balls, got on a train, headed for Denver at 4 p.m. No, it is not a math problem. Now he was really into this, and he started live Facebook posting. I just found 3 bowling balls under my porch, and now I found 3 more. And then he kept digging. He found 10 more. And then he kept digging, and he found 10 more bowling balls. By the time night fell, he had unearthed under the back porch of his house 162 bowling balls.
Okay, so there's 2 explanations, 2 possible explanations.
First of all, you don't have to solve it right away. Just pause. Just pause for 1 freaking second to say, that's amazing.
It's really not.
Why do I try? Okay, Guy, what are your 2 whatevers?
Okay, here's my 2 hypotheses. Either somebody had a bunch of bowling balls and decided to use them as filler so they wouldn't have to buy as much concrete.
Mm-hmm.
But then why?
To stay alive. I don't know. Or it's like some kind of serial killer thing, where somebody or serial thief who just steals bowling balls and wanted to hide the evidence, the way a serial killer buries people in their backyard.
Like the John Wayne Gacy of bowling balls. I killed him with their bowling ball. He goes to birthday parties at the bowling alley dressed as a clown and walks out with bowling balls.
There are stranger things.
Okay, that's good. Caitlin, what do you got?
I have a question. Was this man married?
Yes, he is. The man who found them? Yes, he's married.
I'm just imagining his wife coming out and being like, why did you keep digging?
Yeah.
What did you do to our yard?
In fact, he has a 5-year-old son who came home from kindergarten halfway through this and started helping him, and was calling the bowling balls alien eggs as they kept finding more.
Well,
that would be more interesting. Yeah.
What would also be more interesting is if there was something hidden in the concrete that was of some archaeological significance. But I don't think bowling balls are that old.
I was hoping it was something of archaeological significance as well.
Yeah,
or a murder.
Does one of the bowling balls have the name of some ancient Israeli king?
Jason, tell me that this is at least a little bit neat.
I'm actually pretty fascinated with this. What was it? Geraldo Rivera, who had that whole thing with the vault?
Al Capone's vault.
Al Capone's vault. This is that, but Al Capone for bowling.
Yeah, so I got a picture of the guy, David Olson, lying on a pile of bowling balls draped across them, sort of like Michael Jackson on the Thriller. Except it's a middle-aged white guy.
Oh, I'm looking at it.
Bowling balls, which must be about the least comfortable thing we can ever do.
The creepy part is he has his shirt off.
What?
You're not looking at the same picture I'm looking at.
I just Googled David Olson bowling balls.
Oh, okay.
And he's laid out there.
He became a little bit famous. So here's the story behind it. Are you ready for the story behind it, Caitlin?
Yes.
Because he had to do like historical investigation to figure out what was going on. He lives a few miles from Muskegon, Michigan. Muskegon, Michigan is the headquarters of Brunswick. Throughout the 60s and 70s, Brunswick, as they're cranking out bowling balls, they do a couple of tests of them, and some of them get rejected. The ones that get rejected, they would just throw in the dumpster behind the Brunswick place. And they let people take them home if they wanted to do whatever they want with them, including using them for fill in their yards.
That was my hypothesis.
So this is a person who the prior owner had worked at Brunswick and managed to pull 162 bowling balls out of the dumpster to fill a hole in his backyard before he built his porch. I still think it's fantastic. I'm sorry that Jason's with me.
I love it.
Yeah. Jason's with me. You two curmudgeons. Yeah, you're young, but you're not acting young. You're acting curmudgeonly.
There are way more interesting explanations that could have been true, that would have been interesting. But that's just not.
Here's what I wonder about. Like many millennia from now, well after the apocalypse, and Michigan is just a burnt over whatever. And somebody starts digging up this town and excavate.
Guy, it's a glove. It's a burnt over glove.
Yeah, it's a burnt over oven mitt. And someone starts excavating this town, and they start discovering all these homes with strange bowling balls,
built on bowling balls.
And they'll have to. Someone eventually is going to discover that there was a Brunswick factory nearby, and then there's going to be all these hypotheses about what were these balls for? Were they actually building material, or and someone's going, no, I think they were for recreation, and then it's going to blow the scholarly community away. Wow. There's going to be schisms about what you believe these orbs were found in burnt over Michigan.
Were they did they play catch with them? What did they do with them? Were they
I like that.
Cannonballs. They stopped shooting cannonballs and started shooting urethane spheres because they were kinder. It was kinder, gentler warfare.
Well, they were easier to pick up to put in the cannon.
Yeah, because they had the 3 holes. They had the 3 holes. Okay, I'm willing to let this story go now. Because some people don't like news of the butt. We did news of the butt last week, and so I try to vary it. Thank you. And what's frustrating is when I do vary it, and it's not appreciated.
I appreciate it, Phil. I appreciate it a lot. I changed my position completely.
So is this news of the ball?
I'm not gonna come up with anything, Sky. I was on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert a couple nights ago. Did you know that?
Yeah, did everyone see this?
Yeah, I was on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. I didn't know I was. People had to point it out to me. It was news to me. It was actually Bob, my voice, Bob the Tomato. And, it was just Stephen. It was me and Stephen. And I said, have we got a show for you? And that's all it really was. So we probably don't need to talk about it anymore.
Great.
Except a couple people got mad at me when I said I was on the Stephen Colbert show because they thought I had willingly participated in the segment. Like, oh, you did a voice for... because it was a segment about vegan sex toys. But anyway, we're not going to talk about what it was. We're talking about vegan sex toys. Yeah, never mind what it was. It was a little off color, and it involved vegetables. And so they pulled in a quote from Bob the Tomato. But, I always wanted to hang out with Stephen Colbert, and I got to. So that was good.
Maybe you should try sending him some merch.
Not after that segment. No, Sky. No.
Maybe you could just send him a note saying, I found out about the segment, and I've always wanted to meet you. It was an honor that I was a part of the show, not the way I expected. Here's my latest project. And you can show him
here's post of it. Hey, how would you like to promote this project on your show?
No, come on.
It's also lively and controversial. Yeah. Okay. Our friend Beth Allison Barr had an interesting week. I don't know if you followed this at all, and ended up in a story that started just as a fundraising letter that turned into some tweets that turned into a story in Religion News Service that turned into a story that was picked up in the Washington Post, all in the span of 48 hours. What was it? You asked.
For those who don't remember, Beth Allison Barr is the author of The Making of Biblical Womanhood.
Right.
And I don't know how many weeks or months ago she was on the show.
And the guest on episode, Jason, what episode? Beth Allison Barr. He's on it. He's on it. See, I like Jason. Jason doesn't rain on my parades.
Episode 457.
Episode 457 was Beth Allison Barr talking with us about the making of biblical womanhood. So there is a group called the Center for Biblical. Is it Womanhood and Manhood or Manhood and Women?
Of course it's Manhood and Womanhood.
Manhood and Womanhood. The Center for Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, which was started in the 80s, I believe, to fight back against the idea of feminism affecting Christianity and gender neutrality infecting Christianity and Bible translation, among other things. So some guys, John Piper, Wayne Grudem, started it to make sure we all remembered that women are different than men in the Bible, and they're not supposed to do the same things. So that's the Center for Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. Beth Allison Barr is part of a movement of historians and theologians saying, are you sure you're reading that right? That's really what they're saying. Are you sure you're reading that right? Scott McKnight has done the same thing in his book, A Blue Parakeet, and Beth Allison Barr did it, Making a Biblical Manhood and the Making of Biblical Womanhood.
Nope. That could be a good one, though.
So council. It's not the Center of Biblical Manhood. It's the council. It's a council for biblical manhood and womanhood.
Comprised of men. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Just
otherwise, how would you keep the roles straight? They sent out a fundraising letter criticizing Beth Allison Barr's book, and also, and this went too far, because you would expect that, they criticized her husband's church. Her husband is the pastor of a very small church in Texas outside Waco, First Baptist Elm Mott. I guess that's a town. Beth Allison, is that a town? Elm Mott. Anyway, he's the pastor of the church. They criticized the church because on the church website, their statement of faith included the word God self instead of himself. God was revealing the God self. And they felt, well, that must be, I think this was their thinking, because I know how everyone else thinks. I think their thinking was, this must be the influence of Beth Allison Barr through her husband in infecting an otherwise Orthodox church with heresy. So we'll include this in our fundraising letter.
I have a question, because I actually did not see this story.
Yeah, it's because it was close to the Brunswick factory. That's why.
Right. Are there other examples of this church on their website referring to God with a masculine pronoun? Anyone
I don't know. I think so, but I don't know for sure.
I think that was part of their answer, was like, that's something they regularly do.
So they don't have a problem referring to God as he?
They don't.
Or himself?
No, there was just some gender neutral language on their website.
That's helpful.
Which it turns out had nothing to do with Beth Allison Barr. She had nothing to do with it, and that statement was actually on the website before they hired her husband as their new pastor.
Nice.
It wasn't her. It wasn't him. It wasn't nobody. But that's
wasn't they.
It wasn't they or J or G or anything. It was already there. It was like the bowling balls under the porch. It was already there. It had nothing to do with it. But Beth Allison Barr tweeted about this, that her church, not only were they attacking her, which she understood because, that's her book, she's controversial, but they were attacking her church, her poor little church, which has been struggling during COVID. It's a tiny church, and they have an old building, and they have a leaky roof, and they need money for repairs, and they're struggling in COVID. So, do you know what happened? People started donating money to her church. And people in like the 5 days since then have donated $25,000 to her little church to keep it going, all because it was mentioned in a fundraising letter by the Council for Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. And so that's the story. Okay, good night. Yeah, you have any comments? I realized there was no question. I don't have a question.
But it's a feel-good story, isn't it?
It's a feel-good story. Yes. That's why I brought it up.
It's like excavating. It's like excavating your stoop and finding that it's not stuffed with bowling balls, but it's stuffed with like bags of cash or something.
Yeah. And Dead monkeys. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Caitlin. I'm really sorry about that. Caitlin, did you follow that story at all over the last?
Yes, I have something to say about this that is
Good.
not about bowling
Why
balls.
didn't you jump in sooner and just not leave me hanging there in silence?
I'm taking a lot of medicine right now, and I was a little stunned by all these prior comments. No, I think there's something really, I have to just say that when I was in seminary, and anytime someone would say, I had one professor in particular who was a regular part of his class, he would talk about this. When he would say, God is not a man, the amount of like anger that would come from people was so intense. And when he would point out, there are plenty of masculine images of God in scripture, and there are some feminine images of God in scripture, and that the language of father and son is a relationship language, not a gender language, people would lose their minds. And I actually have found myself completely. And I have found myself avoiding using masculine pronouns for God, not because I think there's anything wrong with that, or because I think we should start just never using them, but in part, one, to help like rewire my brain a little bit, and that I have a lot of really built-in assumptions about the gender of God being male that's been destructive to me as a woman, but also because there's something really helpful about when I'm forced awkwardly to say God more often instead of using a pronoun, it actually can kind of elevate the way I speak about God and remind me of the difference between creator and creature that is really helpful. And it doesn't mean we have to do that all the time, but sitting in those seminary classes and realizing how horrible of an idea that was to people did make me think that maybe there's a kind of correction that sometimes has to happen where you change your language to help reveal something that's actually been corrupted and broken in the way that you've been talking. And you don't do it forever. And maybe you kind of have to like continually check how you're using language. But it bothers me that on one hand, like I love the way that this story ended, but I think it gave people a lot of out to not continue that conversation about the language that we use about God, which is really important. I don't love, like, I get why people hear God's self and they're like, oh, there's an agenda attached to that. But I do think the first time I heard a preacher who was really insistent, like the entire sermon on saying God and not using masculine or feminine pronouns, it did something actually really helpful to me. And I think there's something really good about doing that people should get over the like initial reaction they have and see if there's something good there.
See, Sky, she had something really valuable to add to the conversation.
Yeah. You didn't
have anything.
No, I didn't. I concur. Why is everyone laughing?
Can I tell a story, or do you have something good? You got something good or not?
No, it's not good. It's not good.
When I was doing What's in the Bible, that was one of the things that I wanted to hit, was just the notion. I had one character say, "Is God an old man in the sky?" And then we unpacked that to say, is God old? Is God a man? Is God in the sky? And try to unpack that. And the way, and this created a little controversy for me, and I had to change one thing. But I initially had a character say, God created both genders, so he can't be one or the other. If God created male and female, he cannot be male or female
in his image, right?
Yeah, and that God is described with both masculine and feminine attributes in Scripture. And then I jokingly said, so some people call him her, that's wrong, but calling him is also kind of wrong. So you can call him whatever you want, and we'll all be wrong. And the pushback I got was, but the Bible calls him. So You're saying the Bible is wrong. So I took that out. That's not in What's in the Bible, because Tyndale House was our partner for the first 5 videos, and their Bible department said, you don't say the Bible's wrong. Something about inerrancy, or principle. I don't know.
That's a pretty good principle.
We use male pronouns because the Bible uses male pronouns, but it's not a big deal because he's not either, and it's okay. And Beth Allison Barr's church got a new roof out of the deal. So, hey, everybody wins. Sky. Okay, you can say something now, Sky.
No, I mean, it's an interesting dilemma of language and culture, because you're right. The scriptures, Old and New Testament, use the masculine pronouns when speaking of God or when God speaks of himself. But theologically, it's well documented, and I don't know any evangelical theologian who would disagree with this, that God is not gendered, right? So the language is limited, and in many ways, not just when it comes to gender, but human language is very, very limited in its capacity to describe God. And so we have to, with humility, recognize that all of our language in some way fails to capture the transcendence of God. And that's not just limited to gender. So to Caitlin's point, when we use the word God instead of perhaps either male or feminine pronouns, it's a reminder that we are creatures, he is infinite and uncreated, and there is this massive infinite gulf between him and us. And that's not emphasized much in American evangelicalism. We tend to emphasize God's nearness and knowableness and our ability to grasp his ways and missions and ideas. And that's, we just lose sight of that. So anything we can do to remind ourselves of our humble place in light of his immensity is important. So all that to say, our language is insufficient and we need to realize that more often.
Do you ever address God as your immensity?
No, I do not.
No? Okay.
But this is also why, and I get into this a little bit in my book on prayer, it's also why we have to recognize prayer must transcend language also. That if we only pray with words, we're not really getting at the fullness of prayer or communion with God.
Do we pray with noises?
You can. The Holy Spirit certainly does. You can pray with images, imagination, feeling.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, I'll try.
Groanings, as Paul says.
How do I pray with feelings?
Prayer is not primarily about communication. It's about communion. And we commune with people and things all the time without using words.
You should write a book about that.
Yeah. Which uses words and pictures.
That's right. Does it have smells? Does your book have a scratch and sniff?
That's a great idea.
Yeah,
we should do.
You
need a scratch and sniff Bible.
Caitlin, why do you think it would be bad? Immediately you think that will be bad if Phil does it.
I don't know if I need to answer that.
No. This is a great idea. You did the Laugh and Learn Bible. Yeah. Right? You need to do this. You need to do the scratch and sniff.
Yeah.
Think about like Sodom and Gomorrah can smell like sulfur.
Like burnt marshmallows.
Yeah.
Yeah. A little salty.
Nightmares. You're going to give kids nightmares.
Yeah. Hey, there's a strong link from your olfactory senses to your memory. Like sometimes you'll smell something and it brings back a memory right away.
Yes.
This is a great way to get people to learn the Bible.
This is our new scripture memory program. It's Awana with smells.
So when you come into the classroom, they give you a smell and then you tell them what passage of the Bible it's from. And you get a treat.
Oh, that's David on the run. He's on the run. He doesn't shower. There's a whole lot of just body odor, I think. Like most of the Old Testament.
That's what I was thinking you would think. That's the problem.
Jesus washing the disciples' feet. I mean, we could get really into this.
Give me the benefit of the doubt, at least. All right. Phil, something's going on. What?
I was going to ask, did you see some people tagged you on Twitter on something I tweeted, which were these scratch and sniff boxer briefs that I found? And they're like, this needs to be a news of the butt.
Yeah, no, that's icky.
Yeah,
I don't do icky stories.
I don't get why that exists. It's just like, why? So like, I'm just saying to throw onto the pile of, I'm not sure if it's a good idea. Yeah. Those exist, and you're entering the same realm as that.
Jason, have you ever been in a Spencer's Gifts?
No.
No? Okay. What are you trying to say, Caitlin? You're giving me some sort of signal around the neck area with your hand?
Not good. Nope.
Oh, okay. Edible unders. That's all I can say. So, do you know who Marvin Olasky is?
Yes.
Marvin Olasky. Something's going on, and we have to talk about it. Marvin Olasky has been the managing editor-in-chief, I don't know what, of World Magazine. World Magazine is a conservative Christian news magazine that has been around since the 80s, fairly well respected. Marvin Olasky has been the editor since 1994. That's quite a tenure. He just announced that he was retiring at the end of this year, I think, or early next year. But he quit early. He did not make it to his retirement date. He resigned in protest. And this story made it all the way to the New York Times. More interesting stuff going on with mainstream media noticing, legacy media saying, hey, let's keep an eye on those evangelicals. Something's going on. Something is going on with the evangelicals. A clash over culture and politics comes to World Magazine, a groundbreaking journalistic institution that covers evangelical Christians. Mr. Olasky, over his career, has delivered a mix of hard news and watchdog articles about the evangelical realm under a journalistic philosophy he calls biblical objectivity. It involves taking strong stands where the Bible is clear, which has led World to oppose abortion rights and support refugees, he says, and to follow reportable facts where the Bible doesn't provide clear guidance. So the concept served Mr. Olasky well from 1994 until November 1st, 2021. Oh, look, that's 2 weeks ago when he submitted his resignation. He had, he said, received an effective vote of no confidence from World's board, which had recently started a section of the website World Opinions without fully consulting him. So what they had avoided under his tenure was throwing out a lot of opinion pieces about culture war issues. That was not his thing.
But it's what the market wants.
It is what the market wants. He said, I am not interested in the project of a conservative opinion magazine. There are lots out there already, and that's not my vision of World. And many of the longtime journalists have sided with Mr. Olasky. A few longtime staff members have left over the last year, and a prominent board member resigned as well. What's interesting is we had Nap Nasworth on the show after he resigned from the Christian Post. And he was the political editor on the Christian Post and resigned when they stopped being neutral about presidential candidates and put their full editorial weight behind Donald Trump.
Right.
And he found that, and several others found that such a change in direction for the Christian Post that he could no longer in good conscience work there. This appears to be a similar thing happening now with World Magazine. Okay, here's what I want to raise about this. Because what's happening at World Magazine, the opinion stuff, the head of that is, do you know who the head of their opinion stuff is and a former board member?
No.
Al Mohler.
Oh, but wasn't he? I thought he was doing that at Christian Post.
No, Christian Post, the editor is Richard Land.
Oh, that's right. I always get those two confused.
Yeah. So Richard Land has taken the wheel at the Christian Post and cranked it hard right into culture wars. Al Mohler has taken the wheel at World and cranked it hard right into culture wars. What do they have in common? Anyone? No
Southern
one?
Baptist?
Yeah.
They were both key architects of the conservative resurgence of the Southern Baptists. Paige Patterson, Richard Land, Al Mohler, a couple other guys. When people decided that the Southern Baptist Convention was getting too liberal and that they needed to take over all the seminaries, it was these guys were the architects of taking over the Southern Baptist Convention and making it more conservative. And now these guys are still around and they're doing the same thing at other key institutions and are part of a new sort of turn toward conservatism. Anthony Bradley, doctor that we've quoted from before, scholar, said Russell Moore leaving the SBC, Marvin Olasky being driven out of World, and another event that I wasn't familiar with, and so on, is a great evidence for, quote, the fundamentalist empire strikes back. He says you can read Van Til and Kuyper, drink beer, and still be a rabid 1920s-like fundamentalist. So his point is even these cool beer drinking hipsters are being fundamentalists as they're turning these institutions back into the culture wars.
Yeah, we've talked about this numerous times, that the struggle going on within evangelicalism right now is not between conservatives and liberals. It's between evangelicals and fundamentalists.
Yeah.
And it seems like, at least institutionally, in a lot of places, the fundamentalists are winning.
Yeah. I would almost go so far to say that the conservative takeover of the SBC and now the children of the conservative takeover of the SBC are affecting all of American Christianity. You know, like all of American Christianity is getting torn to the right into culture wars. Caitlin disagrees. Caitlin?
Well, it's funny. The first week that I was here at Duke, I was meeting a bunch of other doctoral students, and I told a couple of them that I had grown up in SBC churches, and they didn't know what that was. Like, had never heard of the SBC before.
Because you're at Duke.
Well, it's just interesting to me that, like, in mainline worlds, they have no idea what's happening with that. And I would imagine the same is true of lots of Black churches in America or churches of other, like, ethnic minorities in the U.S. That, like, that's not true.
Evangelicalism.
Fair. That's fair.
The dynamics within the SBC are affecting all of evangelicalism. Can I say that?
That seems true.
But here's the difference, I would argue, Caitlin. I think you're right, Caitlin, but the difference is the mainline Christian subculture, even the Black Christian subculture, neither of those groups have as much influence on the American culture and political system as white evangelicalism does.
Oh, that's true.
Of the Republican Party, and the Republican Party then having a deep impact on American society.
Yeah, did you hear that? Did you hear what Skye said? Caitlin?
The only reason that I made the face that I made was because, one, we evangelicals can just think we're the whole world. And two, that causes us sometimes to miss resources for addressing our own problems that come from our brothers and sisters that are in other traditions. It's my only point.
Well, that is a really good point.
And that actually accentuates the difference between historic evangelicals and these fundamentalists who are taking over these institutions. Is a traditional historical evangelical would be okay reaching out to a mainline Christian, a Roman Catholic, a Black Protestant, or one of these other adjacent Christian traditions for insight, wisdom, help, scholarship, whatever it might be. Whereas fundamentalists would be like, no way. We're not talking to any of those people because they're not, in their view, doctrinally pure enough to be trusted. So the very fact that, Caitlin, you're saying we should reach out to those people means you can't be trusted.
You're not a fundamentalist. We've finally figured it out, Caitlin.
There was some doubts about that. But...
strongly suspect. Yeah, tell your friends at Duke. You're not a fundamentalist.
Well, and the fact that Caitlin has a point of view and speaks it, and ovaries is automatically suspect. Like that combination is suspect for a lot of people. I don't
think we've ever said ovaries on the show before.
Well,
there's the first time for everything.
The theme today is, round objects. So
yeah. What? So Skye, seriously.
Yeah.
Skye and Caitlin, seriously. And Jason, seriously. Where's this all headed? Because, groups keep trying to individuals within groups in conservative Christianity keep trying to steer their groups to the right back into culture war issues. Or if anyone tries to steer them out of culture war issues, then someone's mad and saying you're ruining the gospel or something. We got to steer back into the culture war because of all the transgender stuff and CRT in schools. So, and masks. And that was the other thing that Marvin Olasky said in the interview is suddenly everyone was mad about the position we took on masks. It's like, why? I never thought that would be controversial, but we're getting angry mail. We're getting hate mail to our conservative Christian magazine because we think people should wear masks. Where does it end? Skye?
It ends in flames, sadly.
Are you saying the world gets burned up and not redeemed?
No, I'm saying everything that's not consistent with the kingdom of God gets burned up and purged away.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Good save.
Yeah. I wonder, though, at the end of the day, is this resurgence of fundamentalism really about theology or even culture war? Or is it its core? I hate to bring this up, but at its core, is it really about Donald Trump?
Oh, it's gotta be,
isn't that what precipitated?
It's got to be bigger than that.
But Donald Trump is kind of
the vaccine. He made the vaccine.
I know, but
now we can't like the vaccine.
His brand of politics, where it's fundamentally about loyalty.
Yeah.
Right. To a tribe, and to him in particular, is the mark of fidelity. And if you deviate at all, you're considered, suspect. That's that fundamentalist impulse. But now we've created this this boundary line that says CRT, masks, vaccines, Donald Trump, LGBT, all these issues that if you violate or think differently on any of them, you're cast out. And that's why Marvin Olasky's out. It's why Nap Nasworth is out. It's why Russell Moore is out. It's why Beth Moore is out. Like all these people who nonetheless hold to Orthodox Christian beliefs question something that was politically unpopular and therefore are cast out. Like that's what's weird to me. I almost have some sympathy for the conservative resurgence in the SBC decades ago, because the arguments people were making then were at least with a pretense of theology.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But then these arguments are not about theology or orthodoxy at all. They're completely cultural and political. And that's what's so weird to me.
Yeah. It's so, okay. What are we going to do, Caitlin? Caitlin, what are we going to do? Can you like huddle up with your Duke friends and come up with a nice ecumenical solution?
I do think one of the professors I had in seminary gave this really powerful image of the death of the defeat of the powers and principalities on the cross, and the fact that there is still such evil that infects structures and governments and churches today, as kind of like the last dying breath of them, like trying to hold on to power that they have already lost. And I kind of feel like that's somewhat of what is happening with like big SBC institutions, with some other really like fundamentalist kind of institutions, where they can do a lot of harm right now, but just like generationally wise, a lot of them really are dying out. Their power is like, there's a time limit on how powerful, Richard Land was a big deal so long ago. This is like the end of his ability to really exert any influence politically or in the church. And sometimes I worry that even people my age are so fixated on that stuff that we're forgetting to think about what we're building now, because generationally, those are not the same problems that are going to exist for my generation. They have like seen what happened with Trump and they're not interested in that. But there's all sorts of other pitfalls that we can get into. And I worry that people my age in seminary getting trained to lead churches are so focused on those problems that are dying that they're not learning how to deal with problems that are coming. And they're not thinking about the hope that could exist. Like I think there's really beautiful grassroots kind of things that are happening with younger evangelicals, whether they would use that title or not. And we're not putting as much energy into those constructive things of like what we're building and what we can do positively, because we're so focused on like the really sensationalist, horrible stuff, which we should care about. But like, sometimes I'm just like, that thing is dying. Like that thing is not going to exist for much longer. So why are we wasting so much energy on it?
Caitlin, that's a really good point. It may be because, I came of age in the early 80s when all of these things were being born, when World Magazine was being born, when we were just like all of this was winding up. Like, we got to build the Christian subculture and it's going to be great. And all of publishing and everything is going to be great. And now watching all those things kind of get twisted and deformed and broken is like, it bugs me, but that is why, we should start a new sort of media enterprise that represents, I don't know what do we represent, Sky?
The disillusioned.
The disillusioned. Well, that sounds like a fun party.
I know.
Attend. Yeah. We work on our branding a little bit.
Yeah. It's those who are no. To clarify, it's those who are disillusioned with the institutions that they've inherited, but have hope and excitement about the future of what it means to be a Christian and a pluralistic society, and they need new institutions to occupy and advance that vision.
I like that.
You know what this feels like a little bit to me? Wasn't there a series of movies where they brought together all the old kind of aging male action stars from the 1980s? Was it The Expendables?
Yes, The Expendables.
Yeah. That's kind of what this feels like. We're bringing together the old crew who are way over the hill, who feel like they have one last adventure in them. It's a little bit like City Slickers. Like, we're all in our 40s now and we're feeling only they're like in their 60s and 70s.
80s.
Right. And let's go have an adventure one last time, even though we're not up for it. And there are some people who are like, yay, they're bringing back the All-Stars, the Expendables. We're going to go see them. And then there's a bunch of young people going, who are these old farts?
Right.
And why do we pay so much attention to them?
I guess I should stop paying so much attention to them. That's what I'm learning from this episode, that I should stop paying so much attention to the old farts.
Well, no, I mean, the New York Times is paying attention to them, but I think it is
so fast.
It is. It's kind of, you're watching the end of an era. Caitlin's absolutely right. Like, the demographics are not on their side. The future of the church is not what they are building. They are grasping their final breaths, and it's kind of sad and pathetic to watch it happen.
I got to wrap it up, but let me end with this. Do you know the comedian Mark Maron?
Yeah.
Okay. He has some hilarious stuff and some really, really crass stuff. So I'm not
like us.
Not an endorsement. No, Sky, it's not like us. Not an endorsement, but he does a long piece. I don't know if you can find it on YouTube about going to a Rolling Stones concert a couple of years ago and how he didn't want to go because he was afraid to see them at that age. He was terrified whether they could still, because he's like my age, Mark Maron, and so he loved the Rolling Stones forever. His entire life, he's loved the Rolling Stones. And he was afraid. He was like, what if I get there and they can't do it? And what if, his worst fear was in the middle of it with Mick Jagger trying to do his Mick Jagger shtick, prancing around like he's 20 years old, that he would trip and fall down and not be able to get up.
Well, doesn't he have one of those little buttons around his neck he can push for help?
Still on life alert. Yeah. And Mark Maron's point was, like, the whole audience at that moment would look around at each other and say, oh no, we're all going to die. Like it's mortality. It's as long as Mick Jagger never falls down, we can suspend the reality that we're all going to die.
So
someday.
Is Mick Jagger like the canary in the baby boomer coal mine?
Yes. Like he is our everlasting gobstopper. I don't know what he is, but as long as he can still prance around in his tight pants and go, yee, we're all okay. We'll live forever. And it's that fear of like our heroes, if our heroes get old and die. Anyway, what did that have to do with Al Mohler and Richard Land? They're like the Rolling Stones. That's what it had to do with them. They're like the Rolling Stones. They were so great in the 70s and 80s when they had to take over the SBC and fire everyone. That was so much fun. But they're trying to pull it together for one more rodeo. Can't we just fire a few more people? Can't we just redirect it to the right one more time? And they're going to fall down. And then the kids will say, who are those guys? Why was that such a big deal? Oh, they were big in their prime. I saw them at Shea Stadium. I saw Al Mohler at Shea Stadium with the Beatles. That was great. Okay, I think I should probably stop now.
I like the metaphor, Phil. But I think they would. I do. Although, and I like it partly because I think they would be so offended at being compared to the Rolling Stones.
Yes.
That makes me happy.
Caitlin, I'm gonna save the last thought for you.
I have no idea what to say about that.
If you even say who are the Rolling Stones, I'm going to be real.
I know who the Rolling Stones are, okay. But I think the one part of your analogy that is pretty good, Phil, is the young people don't care.
That was like 5% of my analogy. That was 5%. It was the best 5%.
Yeah.
That was. Oh, look at the time.
Sorry.
That old clock on the wall says it's time to go. We got a guest coming up. It's going to be great. Sky interviews someone, unless it's me interviewing someone. It might be me interviewing someone this time. We don't know. I forget which one is on this one.
It's because you're getting old, Phil.
You'll find out. Yeah. Can I still do the shtick? Can I still do the finger pistols running across the stage without tripping? I don't know. We'll have to find out. Thanks for listening in. Thanks for your support. Thanks for the support on Patreon. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next time.
For years on The Holy Post, I've been telling you about With God Daily, my daily devotional for people who hate daily devotionals. And I'm really grateful that many of you have signed up, but today I have a special announcement because we are unrolling a brand new update to With God Daily, which includes new features on the mobile app, including the ability to do group subscriptions. So for many of you who've asked about how do I sign up my whole family or my whole small group or even my whole church, now there's a way to do that. So now's a great time to sign up or to give With God Daily as a gift to others as we enter the holiday season. And right now we're starting a brand new series called Heroes, where every day I'm writing about a different Christian either from scripture or history whose life and faith is an example of how we are to follow Christ. It's an inspiring series that will take us all the way through the Advent season. So if you haven't checked it out yet, go to withgoddaily.com and learn more about the daily devotional for people who hate daily devotionals. Our guest this week is Dr. Francis Collins. He's one of the world's leading scientists and geneticists, and the founder of BioLogos. In his early career, he discovered the gene for cystic fibrosis and then went on to lead the international collaboration to first map the human genome. For that work, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom and the National Medal of Science. In 2008, he was appointed to his current role as the director of the National Institutes of Health, where he oversees the country's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Phil sat down with Dr. Collins to talk about his journey from atheism to faith, his relationship with some very famous atheists, and what he thinks about the Christian response to both masking and the COVID vaccines. As you'll hear, Dr. Collins has some very strong opinions about how our culture wars are now actually killing people, and why the church ought to respond to the safe and effective vaccines as a blessing from God and an answer to prayer. Here is Dr. Francis Collins.
I am here with Dr. Francis Collins. Dr. Collins, what do you want me to call you? Dr. Collins, Mr. Collins, Captain Collins?
How about Francis? That would be much more comfortable, as long as I can call you Phil.
I just don't feel like, I've earned that right. It just feels a little too, okay, that's okay. Do you have grandkids?
I do. 5 of them.
And any VeggieTales exposure to any of your kids or grandkids?
They're old. My grandkids are the youngest one has now just turned 15. So the oldest one is like 22. I have 2 of them that are in college right now. It's like, wow.
Okay. Well, for the record, VeggieTales was most popular in about 2002. So maybe not.
Maybe I missed it.
Who knows? You missed VeggieTales. It's just my life's work. No biggie. It's okay. Okay. Dr. Francis Collins is one of the world's leading scientists and geneticists. He led an international collaboration that mapped the human genome, earning him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He's been the director of the National Institute of Health since 2008, when he was nominated by President Obama, where he's overseen the country's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. No biggie, nothing much. He also wrote the best-selling book, The Language of God, about the intersection between science and faith, and founded BioLogos, a group committed to promoting the compatibility of faith and science. So here's what I want to know, because I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. Because Stephen Colbert got to talk to you, and that's not fair. He got to talk to you multiple times.
Multiple times. It was always a white knuckle experience, too. Let me tell you.
It was.
This is not going to be like that, is it, Phil?
Oh, no. Heavens, no. I'm curious, when you wrote the book, The Language of God, what was it at that point in your life that said, I want to do this? I want to kind of put my neck out and say, I'm religious and I'm a scientist and I don't have a problem with that. What motivated that?
Oh, I'll tell you a story. By the way, I didn't grow up in a faith tradition. I was an atheist by the time I was a college student and a graduate student in chemistry. And then medical school, sort of facing life and death issues, realized I didn't really have a good framework for understanding these questions about God, and decided I better do some studying of all that. And to my surprise, over a 2-year period, much guided by some really good people who explained to me the rationality of faith, and C.S. Lewis helped a lot too, I became a Christian. And everybody said my head was going to explode, because at that point, I'm already a doctor interested in genetics, and that's like never going to work. I have never seen a problem in all these years where my scientific perspective about truth and my faith perspective about truth were colliding with each other. You just had to be careful about which question you're asking.
Right.
If it's a question about how nature works, well, science is a good way to get that answer. If it's a question about what is beauty and what is love and why am I here, science doesn't generally quite get you there. And that's where faith can really help. So why did I decide to write about this harmony between science and faith? I've discerned this hunger, particularly amongst young people, to have this conversation, that there was a sense that you sort of had to be one or the other. You could be a person of science or you could be a person of faith, but there's no way you could be both. Or if you did, you'd have to somehow wall off parts of your brain so that they didn't interact inappropriately with each other. That's just not my life at all. I was asked to give a series of lectures in all places, Harvard, to undergraduates. 3 nights in a row in the Memorial Church in the middle of February. Oh, it was freezing cold and snowing. And I figured, 4 people are going to show up. Every one of those 3 nights, 700 undergraduates. They didn't want to leave. They wanted to keep asking questions. This was like such an important thing for them to wrestle with. Most of them were not believers, and they wanted to sort out these things. And I thought, okay, if there's that much interest, maybe there ought to be somebody writing about it, because there wasn't much out there trying to put these worldviews together. So wrote the book, again, thinking maybe 12 people will read it. That didn't turn out to be the case. It's still now 16 years later, selling lots of copies every year. And I'm grateful for that and rather surprised.
Yeah, well, and your profile has risen since you wrote that book. So I imagine as more people find out who you are and then discover that you wrote that book, they keep bumping into the book. When you were, I know when you were nominated to your position at the NIH, there were some voices that said, because you'd written that book, hey, this guy is religious. Is that a problem? Are we going to have a problem? Does he believe in miracles? Does he believe in virgin birth? How could he run the NIH? What was your response? How did you counter that argument?
Yeah, there were objections raised. I guess my counter was, I will not, I promise you, be in a circumstance where my faith perspective is going to interfere with the scientific decisions that you're asking me to make as NIH director. Watch me and you'll see. After 12 years, I think it's fair to say I've lived up to that and have not suddenly gone all miraculous about some experiment that I didn't like the result of. Science is still about getting the truth.
Yeah. So I imagine those voices of concern kind of dwindled over time.
I'm not sure they went completely away. I think the people who really are distrustful of anything that has to do with a faith perspective probably are still uneasy about the fact that the NIH director has held those views. But I don't think they've been able to point to any examples where it actually caused a problem for the truth that science is supposed to be generating. And I think, it's great. I'm a scientist. I believe in science as a rigorous way to get answers. But I'm a fan of science, not scientism. Scientism sort of takes you to the next step of saying there is nothing worth investigating that can't be investigated by science. And then that sort of excludes a whole wealth of really important questions.
Yes,
and
it also
spirituality.
Also really angers poets and philosophers and musicians and artists who say, I have nothing to say to contribute.
Apparently not.
Yeah. Okay. So how old were you when you learned, and was it after you had become a Christian, that science and faith sometimes don't get along?
Oh, well, I knew that before I became a Christian. That was sort of the message I was hearing as a college student, because, you have those discussions late at night in the dorm, and there's always one or two sort of really motivated, fervent atheists who's going to try to knock down any residual faith that might be present in their dorm room buddies. And I watched some of those, and I thought, wow, it sure looks like these worldviews are never going to get along. And I know I'm really interested in the scientific worldview, so I guess that settles it. I'll just disregard the other one. And that means I don't really have to spend much time learning about it because it must be wrong.
Right.
And 10 years later, I figured out, hey, I really missed something there. I became an atheist sort of with the perspective as I don't want to know if there's a God because it would get in my way. And that's not a good answer for the long term.
Right. Do you think in your lifetime, because you've been at this for a while, now that you're 39, you've been doing this for quite a while. Does it feel to you like the conflict between science and faith is getting better, getting worse, in stasis? Where do you see it today?
I think it depends on the framework where you're asking the question. I do think in terms of the conflict about just being fundamental disagreements about what truth is, there's some improvement there. There's still, of course, lots of difficulties faced by people trying to sort out origins, like how old is the universe and how old is the earth? And particularly when it comes to evolution and whether it's acceptable to see that as God's method of creation, which is what I think, or whether that somehow violates what you believe must have been the case because of the way it's described in Genesis. I think those are entirely resolvable concerns, but there are still a lot of people hung up about them. BioLogos, which you mentioned in the beginning, is a wonderful place for people who are struggling with those issues to go, with sort of deeply thoughtful and very much from a Christian perspective of people who do see the Bible as the Word of God. How do you put this all together? And have managed to do so. Not that we always can say, well, I know this must be the right answer, but there are answers, and we can talk about them.
Right.
So that part's going better. And I think BioLogos has done a lot of good there. And now millions of people are going to that site to contribute, to learn, to add new ideas. Where it's not going very well right now, Phil, is COVID-19, where it seems to me here was a circumstance where science and faith could have come together in a wonderful way. Science, in my view, coming up with vaccines as an answer to prayer that were highly effective and safe, and should therefore have been an opportunity for people of faith to sing hallelujah, praise the Lord, we've got something that's going to save us. And instead, in many situations at least, this has also become an area of conflict. And amongst those who are most resistant to accepting vaccination, white evangelicals are on that list. That breaks my heart because I'm a white evangelical and those are my people. And to have it turn out this way, influenced by a lot of conspiracies and misinformation and political things that don't belong in the church or in public health, has just made this so much more frustrating than it should have been.
What was, because you are Dr. Anthony Fauci's boss.
Yep.
Which I would not want to be over the last 2 years. So I was going to ask you, just the last 18 months, in your whole life, where will the last 18 months fall in terms of your memories looking back? Was it the worst of times? Was it the best of times because of how quickly the scientific community responded? What do you say about this?
It was both of those, Phil. It was the best of times in the sense that the scientific community really rose to this unprecedented challenge, at least not for the last century, of having to come up with solutions for this virus that emerged in Wuhan and then suddenly took over the world. And to be able to marshal those resources and have scientists from both the public and private sector drop everything, get around the same table, don't worry about who gets the credit, and to have in 11 months, like 5 times faster than has ever happened, vaccines that were safe and effective by the most rigorous standards. No corners were cut here. People say, oh, it went so fast. Well, didn't you want it to go fast?
Yes, we did, but then it did. But then it did go fast, and that had to have something to do with Big Pharma and Bill Gates and depopulating sub-Saharan Africa.
That's what some people seem to have decided must be the link, having been right in the middle of it. No, it was basically figuring out if people are dying every day, how could we take the newest technology, which is this mRNA approach, which is breathtaking in its speed and its effectiveness, and also get rid of all the downtimes in between the various steps from going to designing a vaccine to having it approved, and make sure those downtimes get shrunk to the minimum necessary, and also put a lot of resources into this, which is what Operation Warp Speed did. And then make sure that there's nobody who's sort of doing this in a sloppy way so that when you got to the end, you would wonder about whether to believe the result. These were incredibly rigorously done, and they involved a very wide range of tens of thousands of volunteers to see whether this worked for them. So I don't know that there has been a series of vaccines tested more carefully than these. And it really is heartbreaking then to have somebody go, well, I don't think I want this. It was too fast. What's wrong with fast if it's done right? Is that really an issue?
Right.
I know people worry about side effects. Vaccines, if they're going to have side effects from all of the vaccines we've tested over all these decades, they happen in the first 2 months. So the idea that there might be something months and months or years later is really not what you would, by historical precedent, expect. So for all those reasons, these vaccines now been in hundreds of millions of people. They're working great. They're saving lives. And yet there's 64 million people in the United States of America who have yet, and who are eligible, these are adults, who have yet to get their first dose because of all this misinformation. And I didn't see that coming. And that breaks my heart.
Yeah. I wonder if I have a lot of thoughts about this because we've been talking about this on the podcast for 2 years now. Just the
Yeah.
response and the evangelical response, the fact that it hit New York City so hard, so early, and everyone else kind of braced, but then for most people it just didn't show up. And because New York City is blue, democratic, godless, that it was easy for, because I have family in New York City and I have family in rural Michigan and rural Iowa and rural Minnesota. And it was such a distant thing that it almost, seemed like that's a blue thing. That's a Democrat thing, and it's not coming here. They're lying. It's not coming here. And that exacerbated kind of the urban elite versus rural, godly people schism that made just people distrustful of the lockdowns, because we locked down in Illinois very early because they assumed it would hit Chicago about as hard as it hit New York, and so we had a mask mandate almost immediately. It never became political in Illinois. It just didn't, at least in our areas, because it happened before we all got used to wearing masks before it became political, because we were expecting to get hit about the time New York was getting hit. And then we did, because of all the travel, between the major cities. So that was helpful. If it had hit everywhere all at once, I think we could have stayed together on it. Do you think so?
I don't know. It might have made it easier, but frankly, what you just said about it never became political. Why did it ever become political? Why was it a reasonable thing to take a public health measure that applies equally to everybody, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or Republican, and turn that into a political issue? It's because our society is so polarized about everything else.
Right.
It only takes a small sort of tweak of a situation for something to suddenly get put up the flagpole, like, oh, they're actually trying to invade your freedom.
Right.
What is freedom about? It's about rights. But it's about one other thing, responsibilities, right? We are responsible to each other, especially believers. We believe in loving your neighbor. And wearing a mask is a way of loving your neighbor who happens to have cancer and is vulnerable to getting infected with this. And you might be the one spewing virus on them, even though you don't have any symptoms if you don't have your mask on. This shouldn't have been hard. And it should have never gotten into this Republican versus Democrat prospect. And really shame on the political leaders who let that happen.
Yeah. But Dr. Collins, my face is the image of God. And if I cover it, I'm covering. Did you hear that one? I was like, oh, well, that's really something. That is really theologically something. You don't have to respond to that. I won't ask you to respond to that. What is your, are you and Richard Dawkins friendly?
I have not seen Richard in a while because, of course, I haven't traveled anywhere recently. I wouldn't say we're like best buddies.
Okay.
But I have volunteered when I was in England to go and have tea with Richard, and he agreed to have tea with me. So we, I think, enjoy the intellectual jousting, although we obviously come from very different perspectives about faith.
Yeah, because he has at times claimed no religious, or there's no serious scientist who could be religious, and then obviously then he'll say, except Dr. Collins, except Francis Collins. So you seem to be like the data point that doesn't fit in that narrative.
Well, there's a lot of those data points. About 40% of working scientists are believers. 40%. So I'm not as oddball as he says.
Yeah, but not all of them, led the Human Genome Project. So it's you're harder to ignore. So I kind of wonder if one of your legacies, okay, you can disagree with me if you want to, if one of your legacies is being so visible as a scientist of faith that you took some of the edge off the new atheist movement, that it was like, okay, so if there are Christians that are like this guy, maybe I shouldn't be as angry as I have been.
Well, if that's been a small contribution, then I feel blessed indeed.
Yeah. Do you
sort of feel like if people have a calling, maybe this is one of mine?
Yeah, I engaged early on, like 6 or 7 years ago, with a prominent atheist in Portland who'd written a book called "How to Create Atheists," a manual for creating atheists. Peter Boghossian, Dr. Peter Boghossian at the University of Portland. And we just engaged and he started to like me and I liked him and we liked each other. He liked me so much that he invited me to fly out to Portland and speak in his atheism class. And to say whatever I wanted, and he would not reply. And, we spent a day and a half together just hanging out. And it, not because of me, but because of multiple Christians he was interacting with that were actually thoughtful people, the intensity of his animosity decreased over time.
And that's the way it ought to be, really. If we're going to invest in each other as sort of a personal relationship that matters. I had that experience with Christopher Hitchens, who, when I first met him, was dismissive to the point of being insulting of anything that I had to say about science and faith. But we kind of stuck it out. And he was a fascinating guy with an amazing intellect and became actually very good friends, even though he never came around at all to the perspective that faith could possibly be true. And ultimately, I helped him with his final terminal illness to get some experimental methods of treating his cancer that I think saved him at least maybe 6 months. And I miss him. I miss the challenge that he presented. What is it? Iron sharpens iron. And he had a lot of iron, but I think it sharpened what I had too.
Wow. And did you develop enough of a skin to kind of not take the barbs seriously, to let them kind of, oh, Christopher, you're silly?
Yeah. And once we got to know each other a little bit, the barbs got greatly reduced.
Okay.
And they would, if presented, they would be as an intellectual challenge, not as a personal insult.
Right. And thrown out with a wink rather than a snarl.
A wink, yes. Still with a glass of scotch, but still with a wink.
Okay. How did you meet Stephen Colbert?
I guess by being invited to his show when he was doing the Colbert Report.
And was that when your book came out? Was it related? Yes. It was related to your book. Okay.
That was my first appearance. And then subsequent to that, other science topics he wanted to hear about, our brain initiative. And we did a funny one about obesity, which was still up there if anybody wants to go look it up. Those were amazing experiences, though, because he did not give you a clue of what was going to happen in your live moment there. In fact, he pleasured himself greatly in not giving you a clue. The first time I went for that book, I'm sitting there in the green room and I'm figuring, okay, he's going to come out and we're going to have this conversation privately. And he's going to say, okay, I'm going to ask you this. And then you might say that. And I'm sort of waiting and waiting. And it's almost showtime. And he pops in and he's already in character. And he says, oh, you're Collins. You're that science guy that thinks faith is okay. I'm going to get you. You're going to go down. And then he walks out. And that was it.
That's good prep. That puts you in the right frame of mind, I think.
You got adrenaline going, that's for sure.
And how far into the first interview were you when you decided, I think I'm going to be okay?
Actually, the first 30 seconds, because you could see he was not really going to draw blood. He was just going to make people laugh. And he was making fun of himself more than he was making fun of my perspectives. At least I think so.
I appreciate his kind of innate kindness that, that he wants to joust and he wants to have sport with you. He does not want to humiliate you.
And maybe I had a special circumstance in that I realized later that his father worked at NIH for many years. His father is a well-known physician researcher, ultimately left NIH to become the dean of the Medical University of South Carolina. And his father and two of his brothers were subsequently killed in a terrible plane crash coming out of Charlotte when Stephen was just 10 years old. And so he absolutely venerates his father with good reason, and maybe therefore has a warm spot in his heart for NIH. So maybe I had a little bit of an immunity because of that. I'll take it.
Yeah, that was so fun. And you were there for his last show.
I was.
You were in the crowd. I was looking at that crowd. It's like, there's Francis Collins. Francis Collins made it to the last show. And I was
standing next to Willie Nelson singing. It was quite an experience.
Do you ever have moments where you say, how did I get here?
That was one of them. That's for sure.
So are you are you basically happy with the path you took? When you spoke out about faith, when you moved away from, founding BioLogos, but then accepting the opportunity to run the NIH? You look back on it and you say, I think I would do it that way again?
Absolutely. It was an incredible privilege to be given this opportunity. I was really hurting when they told me you have to step away from your own foundation. BioLogos had just gotten launched.
I know. I remember.
And now I had to basically turn it over. But it was the best thing because, I don't know, I might have gotten in the way of the whole thing. It's flourished under leadership of other people, and it's built this wonderful community. And the current president, Dr. Deb Harzma, is just an amazing leader. She's an astrophysicist. It has just turned into this thing that I am so proud of, and I don't have to basically be blamed for it. I can cheer for it because it's turned out so well. So that worked out. That was a hard part. But they were probably right. If I was still engaged in that, there would have been more complaints about, are you really paying attention to your NIH job?
Yeah.
You got to be totally focused. And it's a 80 to 100 hour a week job. So you do kind of have to be focused.
And did someone say at that time, and we're going to have a pandemic in about 12 years, so you should sleep up, get your sleep in now?
They didn't quite put that timetable on it, but I think we all knew that we were going to see something. We were
sooner or later.
For some really bad infectious disease. I think most of us thought it would be influenza, but instead it was a coronavirus, and boy, was it a doozy, and still is.
Yeah. How much do you have a feel for how much longer it's a major issue for us?
Well, it's kind of up to all of us, isn't it?
Oh, no, don't put it on that footing.
I'm sorry.
We hate experts, and we don't trust experts, but we want experts to fix it.
Well, I wish it worked that way, but until we have a sufficient public response to provide the kind of immunity that's going to make this thing come to some sort of an end, we're still sitting ducks. There's 64 million people who are still very vulnerable to this infection. Those are the people who are dying every day. Almost all of the deaths, still about 1,500 every day, are unvaccinated people who did not need to die. And I can say that out loud, and it almost gives me a chill. And the fact that it doesn't seem to have changed things all that much is just so puzzling, which just means there's so much misinformation, and people are scared, and people are gathered together in their little tribal bubbles, and it's hard for the truth to get through.
Yeah,
and as a Christian,
you've noticed that?
I've noticed that. And as a Christian, if there's something we're supposed to be most attached to, I mean, straight from the words of Jesus, the truth will set you free. What's the other side of that? Well, lies will imprison you. He didn't say that part, but I think that was implied. We're surrounded by lies about what really is true about COVID-19. And those are not just awkward and unpleasant. They're taking people's lives. Our culture wars have invaded this space, and our culture wars are killing people, literally.
Yeah.
I didn't see that happening, and I certainly didn't see it affecting our faith communities so strongly.
Right.
We've got a lot of thinking to do here.
Was there a point early on in the pandemic where you saw something that made you think, uh-oh, I didn't think it was going to go like this, in terms of, politics and Christians taking the points of view they were taking? Was there a moment when you went, oh, no?
I guess, it started pretty far back when it started to be about masks, and your opinion about masks seemed to be related to your political party. That was a warning sign.
Yeah.
And I worried about that. And then I thought, well, when vaccines come along, nobody will want to turn that into a political issue.
Yeah.
That's life or death, and the data is so compelling. And it was looking pretty good at first in early parts of this year when people were signing up right and left and wondering, how can I find a vaccine? People were calling all around to get one as soon as they could. And then we got to kind of April and May, and we hit the wall. I didn't know the wall was going to be that high or that thick. And we have not made a lot of progress since then. We have made some. Don't get me wrong. The people who were resisting back in May, I think probably a third of those have now come around and gotten vaccinated. But now we're into the group that is really resistant.
Yeah.
I don't know what it takes. I mean, they need to hear from people they trust. And I'm a white guy working for the federal government. So if you're an African American, you're probably not quite sure about that. And if you're an evangelical Christian who's heard the government is basically trying to ruin your freedom, then you're not going to listen to me either. Pastors have a critical role here in all the churches, but they're also in a vulnerable place. And most of them know that if they bring this up, it's going to cause dissension in their congregation. And maybe that's not something they need right now. So I'm not sure the pastoral role has been implicated or brought to bear as much as it could have been.
We've had pastors lose their jobs over their position on vaccines or masks. Okay, you're out of time. You got to go run the science. You have to run science. So last question, you're retiring, stepping down. I'm worried about losing the visibility of a strong believer like you. You know, are there others in the wings that will step forward? Is it becoming easier or harder to be a strong believer in the sciences? And are there people that are following in your footsteps that can fill your shoes?
Oh, yes, there are. And I think if you go to the BioLogos website and see who's writing and who's on their board, you'll see this up and coming group, many of them younger scientists who are deeply committed to their faith and are very comfortable being very public about that. So, yeah, there's a whole groundswell happening. And I'm not disappearing from the stage. I'm going back into my lab to spend more time with the trainees there who are doing great work and have been doing so the whole time I've been science director, but I'll have a little more time to spend with them.
And you can re-engage with your foundation?
I will be able to do more with the foundation. I'm thinking about doing some writing. Maybe that Language of God book needs a new edition because it's 16 years old now. And some of the
things have happened.
Things have happened. And maybe even, I'm thinking about it, what if I were to try to write something about truth and how critical it is for us as believers to anchor ourselves to that despite all the other distractions? Because that's what we're called to do. Even when the truth is inconvenient, we need to be embracing that and not running away from it. And I'm concerned that we have seen that get fractured. And if we have a future, we have more than one epidemic going on right now. There is a virus, and then there's this problem about misinformation or even disinformation. And both of those are killing us. And we need to face up to both of them.
Right. Dr. Francis Collins, I really appreciate your time. It's been great talking with you. And I just, again, I want to thank you for the role you played that people like me, can say, I want to bring my mind and my faith both, even to the public square and not feel like, such a weirdo. And if Richard Dawkins says, there's nobody that believes any of this stuff who's serious, and you say, no, that guy on Stephen Colbert, he's serious.
So yeah, if you can be serious in that situation, you can be serious anywhere.
Serious. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And we'll keep following you with what you do next.
Well, thank you. And thanks for spreading the good word here about how we can all get through this, because we are going to get through this. But we'll get through it quicker if we do it together.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Dr. Collins.
All right. Take care now.
The Holy Post Podcast is a production of Phil Vischer Enterprises, that's Phil's company, and Sky Pilot Media, that's Sky's company. Production assistance by Julie Betcher. Editing by Jason Rugg. Help us create more thoughtful Christian media by supporting us at patreon.com/Holy Post. Also, be sure to leave a review on iTunes so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary plus ukulele and occasional butt news. Visit holypost.com for show notes, news stories, and more.